Zero.
It's Radio Zero with Rick and Rose. Now I can see myself. And you know what's really upsetting me? I'm not wearing a bra. Can you tell?
I can't.
But then I figure you're not wearing a bra either.
Yeah, I know. That's actually becoming more and more of a problem.
Yeah.
For
so,
me.
Oh, wait. This tab is playing
Okay,
audio.
so we got the live
Oops.
stream going. It's Radio Zero. Live stream's going on Facebook on the Radio Zero page, on the Poster Children page, on Twitch at PCJCUSA, and on the Poster Children YouTube channel.
Can people actually see this purple thing on my hair on Twitch?
Probably.
I should probably have dressed up better.
And then I've got some kind of combined chat thing, but I don't know if everyone can see everybody else's chat, so I'm not sure how it works, so I'm trying that out. You can patronize us at patreon.com/Radio Zero. Also, you can subscribe to the podcast for those of you who aren't watching the live stream on Apple, Spotify. You can go to radiozero.us.
The thing.
All right.
Tim Bowers, how are you in a different place in Switzerland and Germany each week? I would like to know that.
I'm
so
working
you better
on
explain it.
I'm working on more guests for the show. We should be having some guest episodes. We do have a special surprise guest today, which is Bag Boy is going to talk to us for a few minutes here.
He's
What's up, fuckers?
Hey, come on. Be cool.
He is
And
being cool. He
please-
swore.
Please don't forget to talk directly into the microphone.
Okay.
Like, put your mouth up against it.
Okay. Wait, are you serious?
I am serious. Do you have
Yeah.
your headphones on?
No.
Do you
Okay,
see?
put your headphones
look
on.
Look at how both Daddy and I have our mouths on the microphone.
You're the only one who calls him daddy.
Uh-huh.
Right. That's
So it's-
right.
It's weird.
You better believe it.
You made it weirder.
What? How come we can't see him? I'd rather see him than me.
Again,
on
I
here.
don't want to have this conversation every
Oh,
time. It's
God.
just the way it is.
If you want to see Bag Boy, though, you can
wanna
find
have
him on.
If you want to have a third camera,
Okay.
it's going to be a huge complex setup that I have to do, but it's not going to happen right now. Okay?
If you want to see him, though, he's on YouTube. He's a new YouTube star. He's famous.
So yeah,
They.
you want
Yeah.
Are you there?
you want
He?
to talk a little bit
So-
about what happened this week. So not shopping related, not grocery related, even though your moniker is
Yeah.
Bag Boy.
It's-
In your free time when you're not a bag boy, you're a SJW, is that correct? All right.
What is that?
It's a thing that that people who hate SJWs call SJWs.
Social justice warrior.
Yeah, it's the
I
most
thought it was
obnoxious.
a single white Jew. But that's different. Okay. SJW.
Yeah. So people are like, "Haha, you're an SJW," and then someone's like, "I mean, I guess that's a word for it," and it's just it's a stupid expression, but
Well, it's a word that's been co-opted, and so
yeah, it's been co-opted.
So let's talk a little bit about what happened this week. And so, speaking of words that have been co-opted, the phrase "critical race theory," right? So, what happened this week? What did you find out that was going on with your local school board?
Well, there was a school board meeting, and I found out that everyone kind of it was shared on Instagram. It sort of went viral in the small Instagram circle of cool people who go to BHS and
Bloomington High School.
Bloomington High School, yes. And what happened? Yeah, so we found out that there's a bunch of parents, real reactionaries, who want to.
Is that a Big Lebowski
Yes.
quote? Okay, just check.
They want to. They went to the school. They were going to the school board meeting this week to express their concern with the possibility of critical race theory being taught in schools.
Now, to be
and-
clear, right? There's no policy with the name
no.
with the words critical race theory in it.
No, they were
right?
just they're all a little worried that it could happen.
Right, because like the same thing with SJW, right? Social justice warrior. It's been a phrase that's been kind of, I wouldn't say co-opted, but just kind of like, not co-opted by the right. I guess it's co-opted when somebody takes it to their own, but it's been sort of created as a straw man or something, as a point of contention to sort of focus their militancy, right? Their protest around the phrase critical race theory, which sounds scary to people who don't know what it is. And it sounds like something almost instantly that certain people would be against because it just sounds scary to them, right?
Like Antifa.
Right. It's similar to Antifa.
Well, Antifa is scary. They should be scared.
All right. So you found out about this through the grapevine.
And all my friends found out about this. Well, I don't know if we're friends. I hope so. And
peers, you can call them peers.
Yeah, peers. I don't like that word though because it's like peer,
Colleagues.
like one who pees.
All right.
This is how that generation like this. You know, I hate to break in here. Who's not the Tonight Show guy, but who's the guy who took over after Jon Stewart?
I know who you're talking about, but I don't know his name.
Yeah, I can't remember his name now.
You
either.
watch him all the time,
yeah.
don't you?
Yeah,
On the Daily Show.
Yeah.
Oh, Trevor Noah.
Yeah, Trevor Noah. So he'll say something really poignant, and then he'll be like, you know, like peeing, and people will be like,
No, that's not.
That's John.
You were talking about
Oliver.
John Oliver.
Yeah, John Oliver.
He does that too, but Trevor Noah does that too. Like most of this stuff is like sometimes I sit in your room.
Yeah,
you know,
Trevor
you
Noah does it worse.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Really? Okay. All right. Interesting.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Anyway.
you and your
I don't
fellow,
know. John Oliver's gotten better with it.
Yeah.
you and the other SJWs at
Yeah, the radical
school.
left. We gathered the Bloomington 29.
Is that what you're called?
Yeah,
I
I've been rewatching the Trial of the Chicago 7 a lot because it's a good movie. So, yeah, we all kind of went there. Well, not all of us, but there were a lot of students there, and we watched these parents get up and talk.
So you went to a board meeting.
Yeah, a school board meeting.
You were in there, and then there were parents.
There were parents also there, and I think there were 3 or 4 parents who got up and spoke, and they said the first one was upset about sex education, and yeah, she had a folder with her. I think it was a folder. It might have been like a Trapper Keeper or whatever. You know, that's your fault that I know that word. I've
Sorry.
never heard anyone else say that.
But let's stay on target here. Okay. She had a folder.
She had a folder that was filled with like porn, and well, no, not explicitly porn. It was you know, illustrations of genitals, and she was saying, "This is in your curriculum," and everyone was like, "No, it's not." And yeah, and then she was like, "They're going to teach 5-year-olds about anal sex," and the school board, like the people listening to it, aren't really. I don't think they're allowed to respond. Either that, or they're insane. Because none of them said like, no, we're not going to teach 5-year-olds about anal sex.
But so you know, as a parent, I have been discussing you know that there are like more and more like 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds who are wanting puberty blockers now, right?
Yeah, but that's not what they're talking about. They're just
Yeah,
talking
they're
about
not-
sex education in the school.
But
So this woman was against sex education. She was taking a very extreme point, saying that they're going to be teaching 5-year-olds this kind of stuff,
But that's
which is not true.
And that's making the 5-year-olds, when they grow up to be 12-year-olds, decide that their name is not Susan, it's John.
I don't think that's not what was going on.
It
here.
was part of it.
Yeah,
but
I'm
I don't,
sure
I don't
that this is
remember
part of
exactly
it.
what she said about
Yeah.
that. She was like, "They're teaching. They're going to encourage and allow transsexualism."
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So they're worried about that. All right.
Yeah,
so
they're
that
worried
was
about all that stuff. And then the rest of the parents were upset about critical race theory because they were saying like it's going to teach our children to hate each other and judge them. Everyone was quoting Martin Luther King, that one thing he said where they were like he was, what did he say? It was like, judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin.
It's funny because I was discussing something with a faculty member, and he said, that Martin Luther King is one quote, which is that quote, right? That's what white people, reduce Martin Luther King down
Yeah,
to.
you told me about that. It's like how
Yeah.
they reduced Dave Chappelle to his jokes.
Yeah, and so it's problematic because Martin Luther King, especially towards the end of his life, was talking about, well, he was against the Vietnam War, but also talking about poor people's campaign and everything like that, and talking about, well, he was always talking about it, but not just civil rights, but also uniting people in terms of like the labor movement and saying unite across racial lines in terms of class and income, and making the world more equitable, right? Whereas now he's been reduced down to just treat everybody the same, right?
Yeah.
One quote.
One quote, yeah. It's like how I was reduced down to Abraham Lincoln was a fascist, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah. So, all right.
Okay, so these parents are worried about
So these
critical
parents-
race theory.
yeah.
Did anyone from the board happen to say something about, we're not, this is not what we're teaching? They weren't
There was a teacher who said, "We are not teaching critical race theory," and I thought I never talked to anyone else about this this speaker, but it sounded like at first it sounded like she was saying, "You don't have to worry, we're not teaching this," and then it sort of became apparent that she was saying, "We are not going to
We're
teach
never going to. Yeah.
critical race theory,"
Yeah.
and then she ended her speech with, if you students have a problem with our curriculum, come and talk to me," or something.
So,
So
the
that
other
was-
thing, I heard something helpful on the radio about critical race theory, which was that somebody trying to explain it to the crazy parents that the adults, like, you and I, Rick and I had this conversation on Radio Zero, like a couple of Radio Zeros ago, where we're having hard discussions about equity and diversity and stuff like that, and how to deal with that in our jobs, and how to deal with underserved populations performing differently on different things, right? So we like the hard and just faculty too, like having problems and stuff, and so the real hard questions and the real hard dialogue and stuff, and that's something that this person on the radio said is reserved for adults to talk about, where that's not what they're teaching in the school. The hard discussions they're not teaching in the school. In the schools, they're teaching something different in the grade schools.
Yeah, that was actually one of the last speakers. One of the last speakers, Alex, went up and said,
You're talking about students now too. So this was just
yeah,
public
okay, yeah. So
public
this was-
response,
This was
right?
public response, and then when
Yeah.
all the parents finished talking, the students got up and started talking, and a lot of them, like I think 6 or 7 of my peers, I guess, had prepared speeches, and they were all really good, and it was just 7 students versus 4 weird parents, and it was I think we all made really good points.
What were
and
some of the points that the students made? Just that.
It's just not what it was kind of hard to make. Sorry, I'm not holding the microphone close.
Yeah.
It was kind of hard to make points supporting critical race theory because of like it would have just been unrelated at that point. It was more what we were all kind of saying was just that the parents opposing it have no idea what it is they're opposing.
Right. Yeah. So it is kind of this construct. They say they're against critical race theory, and they say it pits students against each other, right? And then the students were saying, well, no, they're teaching a more nuanced version of history, right? Saying that there were people who were enslaved, right? And there were people who were killed and groups of people who were killed, and we need to learn their stories also. It's not pitting people against each other. It's, just a more complex version of history, right? American history that's being taught. And you had a good point, is like that kind of basis of, again, critical race theory is just, basing it on firsthand accounts, right? Rather than,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. That's what, towards the end of the night, people just started getting up and improvising speeches. And the parents who improvised speeches were interesting. They were all kind of, there were a few who were upset about masks, and they were like, you're forcing students to wear masks for the rest of their lives. And again, they're not. And even it's like what they were actually worried about, if it had any realistic basis, was that what was it, the state health department, I think, was it was like the next step up from the school board.
The Illinois Board of Education.
Yeah, the Illinois Board of Education was recommending that that all schools have masks for the next year. And
there's nothing our school district can do about it.
Cannot do anything about it. I mean, what they are going to do about it is nobody's going to care. But, yeah.
Okay, and so there were parents who are angry about mask wearing. They're angry about critical race theory, and they're angry about sex education. People had prepared speeches. Students made prepared speeches. Then you were one of the students who improvised, right?
Yeah, I was one of the students who improvised. I got up there, and again, I'm going to... there are so many Big Lebowski references for this evening. I got up there and I just kind of sat there for a while. Like, have you ever considered that this might be, like, instead of running around, blaming us, it might be, like a lot more nuanced.
So yeah,
it might be a more complex of a, New shit has come to light.
Yeah, so you felt a little bit like the dude. You felt a little scattered.
Not in the moment, but I was.
Yeah, okay.
And so what happened? What happened? You got up there, you talked.
So I got up there and I talked, and my first point was that, like, children are going to learn about sex. I was still stuck on that first speech about sex education. So I was like, children are going to learn about sex somewhere, and it's going to be on the internet if it's not in school. And if you try to learn about sex on the internet, you will become a horrible person.
And there's a famous case of a father here, right, in this town, who like has said all kinds of sexist and racist things on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
And like who was in the room?
Yeah.
Yeah. So and this is all public knowledge, and there's a video made of him. And so are you referring to like somebody like that teaching their child about...
Well, that was what happened next. A woman in the back of the room yelled, "Their parents will teach them." And I turned to her and just said, "I don't want you to teach your kids about sex. It'll be really weird." And that caused kind of an uproar, which, that's nice. But yeah, she got really mad and then walked up and handed me a photo of a butthole while I was like mid-sentence.
So I'm kind of stuck on this. A woman, an older woman, came up to my 17-year-old and handed him a picture of pornography. So I'm upset about that.
That's fine. I've seen a lot of them.
Her argument is that this is what's in the textbooks. And so she's just showing, you should be offended because she's showing the kind of stuff that's in the textbooks.
And it is not.
And it is not, at least
And
not in our textbooks.
Also,
and
that's out of context.
it's out of context. That's true.
You know,
It's
like,
not in an educational context.
Right.
It's more of a look at this. This is a butthole.
But I think her counter argument would be is if you're upset about that, why would you be okay with a teacher showing your 17-year-old?
Because my
or
teacher
younger
was
that?
publicly elected.
Well, that's not true.
I
Are
know.
teachers
I
publicly
know.
elected?
No.
No.
I think we
Licensed-
would have even more problems
I
if
know.
teachers
Licensed
were elected.
educators.
Now I've lost
In-
my job.
You wish you were publicly elected.
Yeah. Well,
so that happened.
Yeah. So I kept the photo and started folding it into a paper airplane, which kind of helped. It kind of helped my sensory shit, so I could keep talking. And it also looked really funny.
Right.
and you know this because there's video of you
Yes,
now on
there's
the
a
web.
video.
You can see.
A person recorded the entire meeting and didn't ask anyone permission, and that's the thing about the school board meetings. We have to everyone who gets up to speak has to state their name and address to prove that they're
So there's
sorry, I've been
there's
drinking
an
soda.
Open
So-
Meetings Act. So
Yeah, it's
I
to
think
prove that they actually live in the district.
right. So there's the Open Meetings Act too. So the idea of recording it, I don't know if it's against the law to record the public meeting because that's part of Illinois state law, I believe, the Open Meetings Act. But continue. So
Yeah,
you got
so-
videotaped.
So this old lady has a camcorder and she's standing in the the far right side of the room and history, and I'm smart, and yeah, she recorded the whole thing and recorded us like minors telling our addresses to the board of education, the school board. And she actually spoke and refused to say her address because I feel like I'm talking weird. When she got up to spoke, she said that she wasn't going to tell them her address. And I think there were two reasons. One, because she knew that it could be recorded and posted on, a far right message board, but that's a later story. She was the one who posted videos of us to a far right message board, and the second was I don't think she actually lived in. I might have her mixed up with one of the other parents, but there was someone who got up and spoke and had a camera with her, who didn't live in the district.
Not even from here. It's just a freedom fighter from the hillbilly.
Okay, so
lands around
long
here.
story shorter, you got videotaped. There were a lot of eloquent pre-written speeches about stuff, but they've kind of gravitated towards you. They've published video of you because you said some kind of controversial things.
Did you say controversial?
Controversial.
Let's move
And
on
again.
for your sake.
So yeah, and when you came home, I was very proud of you. I'll just be a mom now, and
Okay,
I
shut
can't
up.
like you gave a public speech.
Yeah,
I
so
thought it was great.
the thing about Abraham Lincoln though is that was my main point with the speech. Is I'm still not talking into the microphone, sorry. My main point with the speech was that the 1619 Project and critical race theory originated from a bunch of teachers, history teachers, who thought we should, use primary sources instead of federal textbooks. And what are you doing?
Explain what primary sources are.
What's wrong?
What are primary sources?
Okay. Primary sources are things like journal entries and speech transcripts and
So, for instance, you had a history class where you had
I had
AP,
a history
AP
class.
history.
AP history class. They don't need to know that. I did fail it.
AP
but-
history was such that you were given like 3 articles. Like you told me
We were given we studied multiple, sometimes more than one primary source every day, and we didn't really use a textbook.
Okay, so you would have like your teacher gave you an assignment to argue for like something.
Yeah,
What was
one
it?
of the
What was it
last
like?
things we did
Yeah.
before COVID. One of the last things we did was a project where we had to make an argumentative essay either for or against the atomic bombing of Japan.
And you were given three
long story
sources
short, we were given 3 sources
on each side.
On each side. It was more than 3, but
Okay.
we had to pick 3 sources on each side, I think.
Yeah, and then you had to argue. You had to use them as arguments.
And he told us that he showed us example essays for both sides and told us that both example essays had been given 100%. So he assured us that it didn't matter which side you argued as long as you used the sources well.
And this is called primary sources, and this is what the parents are against.
They're not against that. So this
And
is the thing: is we
they're
can spin
they're
off
against
into
they're against the concept of critical race theory.
Okay.
And I just
So
it
the
was-
thing is that there's a historical narrative, there's a traditional narrative of the United States, and every country has a positive story and mythology that they work around. Right now, that story is being unraveled because we're acknowledging that even though all these white guys, made America and, all the positive things about America, there was also a huge amount of death and slavery, human ownership, and everything involved. And so that is a counter to this very romanticized mythology of the United States. And so that's what they're against. They're against this new story or us reworking the story of America because they believe America was great. And changing the story is what they're
Exceptionalism.
against. Yeah. And so I think that's just the general problem. And so when you hear a phrase like critical race theory, it's just something that they can build all that around and they can attack and point to and say, we don't want this. Whereas the reality is they just don't like the negative story of America. And I think there's there's a core idea in there, which is that you do need a positive story to unite people around, right? And so the thing is that we're going to be in the process of either accepting the old mythology of America, which I don't think is sustainable, and it's obviously not equitable, and it's as we become more and more diverse as a country, less and less people, that story is going to resonate with less and less people, right?
Yeah.
The old white guy narrative, right? The dead white guy narrative. And so we're working on a new narrative, but right now we're kind of in a negative reconsidering and everything like that. So we're going to have to at some point replace this old story with a new story that's also positive, probably a mythology also, but is more inclusive.
Yeah, I mean, what I think most people my age would argue is that the positive mythology to replace, because the true history of America, especially concerning, racial injustice, is a lot darker than even the most accurate textbooks will tell you.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's wrong. That's hyperbole. But yeah, so education reform will not be a wholesome thing, and it won't be a nice story to hear, but it can be replaced with, the story of like people learning the truth instead of like it's like the ending of 1984 if it was the exact opposite.
Right. Like a new understanding.
A new understanding and like
of what the positives are. And so that's the thing is if you actually start including people.
The positive is that we understand it.
Yeah. And you also start including the huge amount of people who have been excluded from American history. And even though a large portion of their story is negative because it involves genocide and death, right? But it also can include and show that this country has also been built on collective movements of people helping each other, right? Not just simply white men owning land and people, right?
And
Okay, so
I do want to get back to the thing I
Yeah.
said about Lincoln, because that's what.
Okay, so you
That's
said
what this
something. You
fucking
said something
crazy
about
blogger is
Lincoln.
talking about.
Yeah, that really that
That
set
was-
a bunch of people off.
That was one of the examples I gave. It was, Lincoln was a white supremacist. And not a lot of people know that. He freed the slaves, but he was a white supremacist. And I know that because of my crazy liberal teacher in AP US history. I'm kidding. I think he's a libertarian, but he might not be. I don't know.
but it doesn't
okay,
matter,
the
right?
point
So
the point is he had us read he wanted us to read primary sources. So instead of reading a textbook about, how Abraham Lincoln was a great guy he was from Illinois, and he lived in, like, there was something with a log cabin, and
you said there were 3 pages in your
there were
textbook
3 pages
about
in
his
my
top
textbook
hat.
about his big fucking hat.
Right. Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
that in a few grades back.
Right.
We learned some trivia about his hat. Like, some kids tied a string to a tree once and, like, ripped it off of his head while he was walking by because he was so tall, and he kept papers in it and stuff, so they all went scattered around. And I know this instead of the fact that during his campaign and after his campaign, he gave constant speeches about how he did not believe he was a scientific racist. He said explicitly, I think there are, okay, I said explicitly, now I'm kind of confined, but he said that there are scientific differences between the races that will prevent black people from ever being truly equal.
Right.
right.
But as the superior race, white people should not own other people as property.
Right. And so you chose to highlight that. And
I chose
so-
to highlight that because that's not in textbooks, that's in primary sources. And primary sources are what the critical race theory and the 1619 Project came from. So knowledge like that is, I think, it was sort of an obscure point.
Yeah,
looking
but
back.
I think it's a distraction. So I find it distracting, and it upsets me when. So again, I'm just going to sound like a guy who's like, Abraham Lincoln's the greatest person who ever lived, right? But it's similar to the Martin Luther King thing. It's like having these icons in history and in American history being reduced down. And so I think the reality is that, I mean, Lincoln was an abolitionist, right? He was not enlightened to the point where he believed in equality of the races. But the fact of the matter was, in the 1850s and 60s, the best you could expect, and it was a radical notion, so radical or revolutionary that our country went to war over it, right, is that people should not own other people, right? And
Yeah.
eliminating that is an important thing.
Well, no,
Does
it was
that-
about
does that-
states' rights to people owning other people.
But that's okay. I don't even want to get into that. Again,
I'm
that's
sorry. It's a
that's
joke. It's a
distraction.
joke.
I
Go on.
understand, but it's that tendency towards distraction and saying something that's volatile that gets us away from some sort of common understanding or way forward. And so the thing is yeah, Abraham Lincoln was a man of his times, but we have to give him some credit for holding the line and being a part of the abolitionist movement and putting human lives and the government behind that idea, right? Is that
Yeah.
that slavery was wrong and should not be
It was
part of America. And so, but it's true that he did not believe in equality of the races. He just didn't believe
Right.
in the ownership of humans.
So
he
you-
thought it was
so
morally corrupt.
it was kind of a mistake. I should have clarified that I wasn't really, my point wasn't about Abraham Lincoln necessarily. It was just that, I didn't.
Yeah.
And it's really a mistake because I was also trying to say that I didn't have anything to back up the notion that critical race theory is not about tarnishing your heroes. It's
Oh, Yeah, and
then I just
yet-
kind of
yeah.
and yet
Tarnished it.
Abraham Lincoln
Yeah,
was
yeah.
a scientific racist.
Right. So when you came back, you were a little
He would
distraught.
have grown up to be a eugenicist if he didn't go to that theater.
Right. And so okay, so long story short, not short. They've sort of put up videos of your talk because you said things like you don't want these parents to teach their kids about sex.
Yeah, that's
which is
not,
exactly.
I don't think that's as important.
I think it's important, but what's important here is that you've been kind of set up as a example of how crazy these kids are. So what have
Yeah.
you learned from that? Sort of. They didn't so these right-wing bloggers put up video of you talking. It's kind of improvising, saying things about Lincoln, saying things about parents shouldn't be,
Teaching their kids
not
about
trusting them
sex.
about
Yeah.
sex.
Specifically
parents.
her. I was only talking to Becky
Exactly.
Swan.
But, and then they're posting clips of you with your home address on their
And
blogs and
that's
referencing
that's
you.
not just me. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk over you, but it's really I don't want, because the kids who prepared speeches these were some of the most brilliant speeches I've ever seen, and we're kind of doing the same thing that those right-wing bloggers are doing now. I mean, they are. I'm not as big a part of what happened as it's seeming.
Right, but
Right,
we have you here, and we're
So-
talking. We want you to be more.
I know,
but-
but I have this platform, and I want to direct attention to the actual what was happening.
Right. And so then I think the counterpoint to this is that it's important that those students, who had the prepared speeches and said all those great things, that maybe the next time is having a document of that so that when these right-wing bloggers cherry pick what they want the event to seem like and what, if, that you have a counter video that shows
That's-
what your side said.
They used one of the prepared speeches after mine. There were two videos that they posted on the blog. The first one was my video, and it was it had 3 or 4 paragraphs to go along with it about how this isn't true. Lincoln wasn't a racist, and if these students were actually learning critical thinking, they would know that this is a ridiculous statement. And then at the end, 2 sentences from I think she's actually the high school valedictorian. I don't know how that title works, but she's like one of the smartest people I've ever met, and she gave an amazing speech, and they recorded that speech, and put that video after my video, and wrote 2 sentences that said the next student. It was, what did it say? It was like the next student details how her parents brought her to this country as a child. Why doesn't she ask her parents why they brought her to such a racist country?
Wow.
And her parents didn't bring her. She was born here.
Right.
Her parents didn't bring her over as a child. That's not even in. That's not in her speech. So
They
I don't know if
assume
they-
because she's a person of color, right, that she's somehow.
Well, I don't want to accuse them of being racist. I do want to accuse them of being racist, but that's kind of a distraction. They are racist, and they probably did.
You also
she's a
said that
person of
like
color.
one of them called somebody a whore. Also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of them called another student a whore, but that was I don't think that guy is the face of any movement.
Okay. Well, all right. So we had a really interesting discussion because you were with professors.
I was being sarcastic. He has a Facebook page.
Yeah. So Rick had like at the same time that Graham was being an SJW. What is it called?
Yes.
Just imagine a vegan.
Yeah. Okay. Rick was. You were with other. You were with history professors or politics and government professor and music professors, right? Talking about sort of ways to. You had an interesting discussion too, and it was about ways to unify, like revamp the history teaching, but it has to be in such a way that it's still a positive
I think it's just a realization I came to
mythology or
after
something.
what was happening with Graham, and then talking to people is that history. I mean, it is a shared mythology, and you need positive mythologies to unite people. And so just that idea I was talking about earlier is that we've got to figure out a way where we acknowledge all the terrible things that happened, and we kind of tear down this old narrative, but we replace it with a positive narrative, and then trying to find what that positive narrative is. And I think part of it is that regardless of the sort of atrocities in American history, those cultures and their descendants have survived, and been powerful contributors to our country and culture, and we need to acknowledge that. And so that's the next step, right? We need to acknowledge that the history we were taught is biased and skewed. We also need to realize that we're going to have a new history, right? If we want to maintain this country or unite this country, or at least have groups of people, we're going to have some kind of shared mythology. And what is that? And what is that positive shared history, shared mythology, whatever you want to call it? And my argument is it's that kind of people's history of the United States, perspective, which is removing a lot of
no other country teaches their history. Like, there are other countries with fucked up histories that don't, like, I don't want to interrupt you for too long, but America could be like one of the first countries to teach the entirety of their fucked up history.
Well, just because you can fit it in, it's shorter, I guess, but I'm trying to find positive stories in a positive way, because I think it's important for us to, and I think that's that idea of collective work in that idea that it's not simply about land ownership and power and individuals. There's a huge history of collective movement. The reason why we have 8-hour work days and we don't work on the weekends, and the reason why children aren't in factories are not because individual white landowners or owners of corporations decided that was a good idea. It's because a large number of people grouped together and used the force of numbers and used democracy and lost lives fighting for the collective betterment of the population of this country. And we've had a long period of time where people are saying that's not what America is and that's not what it's for. And I think what's even scarier is that the people who are acting like they're the voice of the people, like Trump, are actually the people who are undermining the world and what's great about this country. And they've somehow convinced their followers that, progressives, people who want to work collectively, people who want their taxes to go to the greater good, people who want to be part of a union so that they can get fair treatment at the workplace, those are somehow the people who have ruined America. And so it's an amazing trick that's happened, right? Is that it's been flipped around where the jerks who are in power have somehow convinced the working people, or a large number or a large section of white working people, right? Or white poor people, or just white non-rich people, that somehow the ideas that talk about, lifting up people collectively are the ones that are ruining their lives, rather than the people who are obviously just draining wealth from the country and using it to enrich themselves. That's the problem. So I don't know where I'm going with that. All right. Thanks, Bag Boy.
Was there anything else you wanted to say?
Yeah, Becky Swan, if you are listening to this, fuck you.
No, that's not good. All right.
Is that the woman who gave my child the picture of the butthole?
Yeah, and she also handed me a photo of a vagina later in my speech, and yeah, that was weird.
Some of the I talk, my only take on my only interjection in all of this was that sometimes when you trying to tell people that Abraham Lincoln was a racist is kind of like trying to explain the movie Midsummer to my dad, who just wouldn't be able to understand, doesn't have any like, what is it called, like the conceptual knowledge, like, or textual knowledge around it, right? So these people, when you want to argue with these types of people, they just don't have any contextual, like, knowledge around any of this stuff. They don't even know what they're yelling about. My kids are going to be taught critical race theory, and they don't even know what that is. These are the type of people who and she doesn't know what's in the text, the sex ed books, textbooks. Sorry. All right.
But it doesn't matter. They feel like their ability to, control what their children see and hear, is being compromised by, the public school system, and they feel like they're paying for it too. So and they feel like it's part, they should be a part of it. I think the problem is that there's, a lot of counter evidence that if you don't have sex education, if you don't talk about history in an equitable way, you're going to have problems where people don't understand history, don't understand the downsides of white supremacy, as if that's
what I'm talking about.
That's
Textual context,
and then also the downside of having children who don't know what sex is, and then wind up getting, they're afraid that their kids are going to get pregnant, and they think withholding and keeping them away from that, from sexuality, is the solution. And
or
it's just a
like,
difference of philosophy, which is like either you build a wall or you fix the way people see the world, right? Either change the world or you build a wall, right? And that's kind of where we're at right now. We got two sides, and it's going to be very hard to bridge that gap.
Well, thank you, Bag Boy. Anything happen at Jewel lately?
No, he said no. We talked earlier, and he said there's nothing going on.
Nothing to report.
All right, let's.
Thank you.
I don't know what else we'll talk about, but let's. Thank you for.
Let's talk about Joe Biden. Warning: this next segment.
What are you angry about him for some reason?
No. I just.
Okay, this is.
Actually, I am. He's doing a bunch of shit, but there's no time.
All right, thank you, Bag Boy.
You're welcome.
Practice your talking points. Practice your riffs.
He will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
What about you, Rose? Anything going on?
After that, I don't know. You were well. I watched actually. I watched a little of Euphoria with Bag Boy. Bag Boy had me watching that. Too bad he's not here still to talk about it. But I watched that. I watched the first episode of it. There was a lot of sex and a lot of drugs. So I was trying to and the sex didn't bother. Like, I don't care at all about the sex. He's like, well, I know there's like 4 different sex scenes, and parents seem to get very upset about that. I'm like, I don't care. Like, what happens, like the worst thing that can happen with sex. I mean, I guess there are worse things than, the girl could get pregnant. A girl could get hurt. I guess you could get hurt and, you could be traumatized and stuff. But like, it seems to me like the drug use was more upsetting to me, just the constant drug use and like all the different types of drugs that I didn't even know what they were and stuff, right? And just thinking, that's my kid is going to be doing that. Like, I don't really, and he's a boy, so apparently I don't care. Like, I know, I'm assuming he has enough sense to not get a girl pregnant and not stick his penis in her butt and not whatever else. He seems like a good guy who wouldn't do this type of stuff. But the drug taking scares me, and I hear that every child in this town does drugs. So, like, every single one of them does drugs.
So what's the difference?
So, I'm watching that, and I'm like, so is this, like, are you going to be doing all these drugs too? Or, like, talk to me about, and he's like, no, I'm 3 days sober. He's cute. It's nice that we have open rapport.
And our discussion around Euphoria, I was just kind of like, I don't know if I want to watch this. And it's like, yeah, I know it's upsetting and everything like that. But I was just kind of like, You know, I've seen Blue Velvet. You know, my generation had this upsetting stuff too. It's more just I'm kind of exhausted and I don't really want to necessarily watch this again. You know, it's like
That's
I've
how I
been
feel about seeing like children die in
right.
movies.
Yeah. And we've talked about that as like
Yeah.
a cheap narrative thing.
Yeah. But so you don't want to slog through more drug taking.
Yeah, I understand, you know, I guess I realize that there's all this bad stuff, but I also do find myself, as always, and we've talked about this before, is, you know, realizing that people are worse than I think they are.
Worse
Right.
in what way?
Well, no, you know, just like, you know, when the Me Too movement happened, I thought we were doing much better. And then I realized, oh, no, we're not.
Oh, so you there's more drug abuse than you think there is.
No, I'm not as,
Oh.
I'm just about people hurting each other and hurting themselves and watching movies about that. I think there's a place for stuff like that. And I think I went through and my generation had movies. When I watch that in Euphoria, I just kind of feel like, okay, I'm seeing an updated version of Blue Velvet,
Yeah.
right?
I was thinking Clockwork Orange. I was like, what?
Yeah, Clockwork
what was I
Orange
watching when I was
is-
this year?
is an
this
earlier
old?
example
Oh,
of
I
that.
guess
Yeah.
I was watching Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, so I understand it in a purely analytic film kind of nerd way, and I see the place for it. But as an adult and an old man, it's not that I'm an ostrich putting my head in the sand, right? It's that I don't feel like I'm learning anything. I kind of feel like I'm just watching.
You've already walked that beach.
Yeah,
Okay,
and I
now
feel
let me
like
ask you-
I'm
Yeah.
kind of like why do I want to watch this again if I'm not getting if it's not revealing anything to me. It's just
So here's what I want to ask you then. So can you compare and contrast Midsummer versus Euphoria? They both have one word in their titles. Midsummer has a lot of drugs also. It's like just constant. People are just on drugs constantly. There's pubic hair and
yeah, I mean
lots of sex.
but I think my feeling about Midsummer is in some ways it's even more it's similar in that I don't necessarily I think this just happens as you get older because you've seen stuff and you see the influences and you see echoes or it even seems like direct references. It's to me there's no way that Midsummer is going to be as profound. Like, so Midsummer is the Blue Velvet
right.
of this generation, right? So
Or
if I was 17 when I saw
Wicker
Blue
Man,
Velvet,
whatever
right,
yeah.
that had a huge impact on me.
Right.
If I'm 54 when I see Midsummer, it's not going to have that same impact on me, right? I'm going to be much more looking at, what, what in the past has been like this, it's
Right.
Wicker Man, it's all these other, films of the 70s that intertwine, fear and alienation and strange subcultures and sexuality and violence and death and it's a much more analytic thing.
Yeah.
And so seeing Blue Velvet when you're 17 in 1984 or whatever is, and again it works in the reverse too, like showing my kid Blue Velvet in the present day when he's 17, it's going to be completely different. It's going to be like, oh, this is kind of like Euphoria, but not as extreme and more goofy stuff, right? Or it's kind of like a silly cartoon version of what Euphoria does. But I don't know. It's just kind of like I don't need to. It's just harder for me to be profoundly affected.
You know what's really weird is like so Euphoria
Or want to be,
right. Yeah. So Euphoria. So Blue Velvet has Kyle MacLachlan who played Paul Muad'Dib in Dune, and Euphoria has the girl that I can't remember her name is Zendaya, who is going to be Chani in the new version of Dune. What is the connection with Dune? That's weird.
And I've already made my position clear on Dune.
Whatever. Okay. So I did notice you watching a show yesterday, though. You watched like all of the John Wayne Gacy documentary or something like that.
Yeah.
That was okay for you to watch?
Yeah, and I'd love. I kind of want to save that for this other podcast I'm on,
okay.
just because it's kind of a running joke. But no, there's something great about it in such a weird, perverse way. But it was nostalgic for me, so it's really odd. But
what were some of the
So seeing Jay Levine in this documentary, seeing what's his name, Russ, all the reporters from late 70s, early 1980s Chicago, seeing late 70s, early 1980s Chicago and the suburbs, video footage, those images, which, again, growing up, like, so that's the thing, talking about Blue Velvet being, having an impact on I think I must have been 17 when Blue Velvet came out, but like, John Wayne Gacy, being 13 or 14 and that being on the news every day. And I think if you didn't live in the Chicago area at that time, I mean, people knew about it across the United States. It was definitely a national or international story, but how intense those couple of years were on, just regular TV talking about this stuff. I realized what a profoundly disturbing, I mean, it's obvious that it's profoundly disturbing, but to think about being a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, a teenage boy, watching and learning about this, and how much of an effect, that was on my life.
Did you? So was there context provided around that too? Did you talk to your parents about that, or who did
like
you?
When I was a kid?
Yeah,
definitely not.
Like, so you were.
This is the kind of stuff where you'd hear about it, you'd see it on the front page of the newspaper, you'd be watching the news, and it's just the kind of thing. It's just maybe the nature of my family, but there's not really a lot. It's just in 1979.
It wasn't dinner table discussion.
Yeah, there's no way you're going to sit around and talk about a man who, grabbed young men off the street and chained them up and sexually assaulted them and then killed them and buried them in his basement. That's not really the kind of thing, but all about it, right? It's there. I mean, it was kind of the beginning of that. It sounds stupid when I say it, but it's like people talk about how, the war on Vietnam on television, but to me, that definitely, the only other thing I remember being as disturbed about around that time was when they were talking about Sid Vicious and this band, the Sex Pistols, and just hearing that name of that band on the TV was so upsetting and terrifying. I don't think people even understand. Like, if you're like 12 years old and they're talking about, and you listen to rock music, not punk rock, obviously, because that wasn't allowed in the Chicago suburbs in the mid 1970s, but just the fact that, what's his name? Walter Cronkite says Sex Pistols and says rock band, punk rock band, and that kind of stuff is that was kind of the level of, terror. There was a level of terror of like learning about the adult world or how scary the world actually is. And for other people too, that's the thing, is that I think people honestly believed that and spent a huge amount of time denying how much, bad stuff was happening and how bad people who were, white men, they could get away with because they were white men who were politically connected or just white men, right? They could do things. They could molest children. They could, get away with murder, literally. And then all of a sudden that all started unraveling. And then hearing about that world, was super upsetting. So that's my take on why I was able to watch a John Wayne Gacy documentary. It was.
You didn't watch that with the 12-year-old though.
No, I did not.
And then you guys watched a Martin Scorsese movie after that, though. It's like a lot of intense TV watching going on at our house. I can't remember what what I had to talk about would take more than probably 2 minutes, or probably isn't good for the last 2 minutes of the of the
Is there something you're upset about, or is it?
upset.
No, you said
just
like
yeah,
something.
just this sort of professionalism workshop, like teaching students professionalism. That was, we're lucky enough at ISU where we get to learn how to teach better, and so we're working on how to teach our students to be more professional, and that's a trigger word or a key word for for whiter, it seems like, for some people, right? But all of the people in the workshop were all white women, and most of them were. There were some other people there too, but just I know, making sure, we all talked about our pet peeves, in the class, which, people were complaining that students are on their phones or students are on their computers during the class. My complaint is just people not turning their work in. I don't like it when people don't turn in their work, because I want to grade it. So, that's my only thing. My only thing is trying to get students to turn their work in. And so, but like all the different quote pet peeves, like the one student that I used to have that would get up and walk out of my class is now, listed on Forbes 30 under 30, and that used to drive me crazy, that behavior. So I don't know. It may be that since we're in a creative field, that our students, shouldn't be expected to be that quote professional. I don't know. And are these sort of putative, like Jody and I laugh about, like, students who write, hey, blah, 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 blah. Like, they just write hey to you instead of dear, whatever, dear Rose or dear Jody, I would like to change my class or something.
Yeah, I think it's a tightrope, right? So
Yeah.
what's professional? What are your responsibilities and everything like that? But I personally believe that part of my job is to make sure that by the time someone graduates college, they're able to get stuff done on time.
Yeah.
And turn it in, because that's kind of
and come to class like you would come to work.
A universal rule.
Yeah.
But on the other side, I had that class. I always talk about my computer science class, where it was like the teacher said, well, the programs have to be done by 5 p.m. on Friday, and every hour after that you lose a letter grade. And it was just panic. And then my first computer programming job, the big project we worked on, we were working on it a year after deadline.
Right, yeah.
So that idea that, the real world is all about deadlines and getting them done on time. And then my first real world experience was
that it
wasn't true, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of fudging going on.
Yeah. And for me,
missed deadlines. And so the question is, though, is nowadays, I think it's even more important that you be able to schedule your time and get stuff done. And what you do in college, where you're kind of on your own and trying to figure out how to juggle everything, that's just basically everybody's life now.
Yeah, time scheduling. But it's harder for some people than it is for others.
Yeah.
And you're like, so I'm sitting there, thinking to myself, well, I have had students who are moms who had, had something go wrong. They had to take care of their kids, or they had to take their parent to a doctor during my class, and so they couldn't come to my class. So there's always that. And then and so my question was, how do you navigate that? And the professor didn't really have an answer for that. And I realize I'm here for that. And what I did learn was, I'm probably way too lenient. Like, I've got to just be like way more of a hard ass, I guess. And then the other thing was just like the accommodation statements, like when a student has the card that says that they do not need to turn in their work and, on time because they get anxiety, and that they're going to be missing lots of classes because they get anxiety, and so they cannot attend your class. And I was like, what do I do about that? Because how does that student get a job after this with my degree? You have a creative technologies degree, but you made it through college, but you weren't able to do any, you weren't able to quote be for professional, I guess.
Yeah, I always talk about this too, is the guy talking about learning styles and how he used to create classes that cater to every type of learning style, right? So some people would be taking written tests, some people would be doing, writing a paper, some people would be doing discussions.
You can
and
write a
everything
song about your
Yeah.
essay.
And then the thing is that he realized most of his students were going to be taking the GRE. And it's like, if you spend all your time teaching your students, it kind of doesn't matter if their marker of success or being able to continue on requires them to complete
That
an
GRE,
exam
yeah.
that requires you to take, multiple choice questions and write essays and everything like that. If you change your teaching to fit their style, they're not actually learning how to succeed in the end result, right? Which is like, oh, you're going to have to take this test. And it's like, well, I've never taken a test, or I'm not good at taking tests. And it's like, you haven't taught them. It was that idea of like people's learning types, how that it kind of doesn't matter. You're not supposed to teach to every type. You're supposed to teach to what the end goal is, right? And if somebody's not prepared, you got to teach them to be prepared. And it's actually the opposite. You should be, working to figure out ways to, help them build up those skills that they lack. And so that's helped me. And then also that idea of being empathetic, right? And listening, but also maintaining standards. So the thing is that it's, if a student needs an extra day or an extra week to do an assignment, that's fine, but that doesn't mean that you grade them easier. Also, you grade them, you still maintain the standards that are expected of them, because that's what's going to happen is like, even if there's some kind of accommodation or something happens, if it's not about reducing the expectations and reducing your standards for what a good job is, it's about accepting that they have something exceptional happening and being, having sympathy and empathy, but also making sure that they understand that they still have to complete the work up to a certain standard, because that's what's going to be expected of them in their whole lives, right? So it's finding a way to balance those two things. Yeah. Which is not easy.
All right.
All right.
You have something coming up now.
I do? Oh, geez. Yeah,
yeah.
I got a workshop I got to go to, or a technical onboarding. I took a Myers-Briggs, and apparently now I'm an INFJ
Is that
instead
changed?
of an INTJ.
Is it?
Yeah, apparently I've learned how to take the test so that I'm even more unique.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Did you have to take that for the workshop or something?
They suggested it, and I'm going to make sure I don't say anything.
Wow. Okay.
I have strong opinions about the Myers-Briggs test.
You probably should say something. I was like all over this. I think these people probably hated me in this workshop.
Yeah.
I was just
I think...
Because I don't care anymore. I'm just like, well, you know what? How about the big fat white elephant in the room, which is...
all of us white elephants sitting around talking
about, exactly.
Yeah, it's a difficult role to play as a Gen Xer in our current environment, because you're kind of wedged between these kind of boomer ideas and these millennial ideas.
Oh, and it's terrible.
You just wind up seeming like an asshole, I think.
Yeah, thank God there aren't that many of us. A whiny asshole. Thanks for listening.
Always tearing things down, just super negative, for both sides. Both sides just think you're a negative person.
You know what?
It's
Abraham Lincoln was a racist. Though.
One side thinks you're a right wing, crazy person. The other side thinks you're some kind of PC, cancel culture person, and you're just trying to be like, come on, the world's a lot more complicated. Man. Let's just try to fucking work on it, and let's not get lost in these flights of fancy and these conspiracy theories and these tangents. But everybody wants to do that now. They don't want to fix the problems. They want to talk about the problems. All right.
Thank you.